I'm Peter Haratonic, and on behalf of the Department of Media Studies and Film, I'd like to welcome you to the 8th Annual Dorothy H. Hirshon Film Festival. These series of events was established through a bequest from the late Dorothy Hirshon, who was a longtime member of the New School Board of Trustees and a great supporter of the arts in general and film in particular. Each year, we invite a distinguished film media maker to join us on campus to share their work and to work with our students. Over the years, we've had a distinguished lineup of documentarians, multimedia artists, feature film producers and directors, and tonight's guest is no exception. I'm particularly pleased that our guest is able to join us tonight. Perhaps you've read recently about his work in the New York Times, and I'm sure you'll hear more about his upcoming work. And it's particularly important, I believe, because it represents for us, our own internationalization and globalization of the media forms. As I said, I'm very pleased that Haile is able to join us here tonight. To give our guest a proper introduction, I'd like to introduce Michelle Mater. Michelle, as many of you know, is a longtime member of our faculty and also currently serving as Associate Director of the New School's Bachelor of Arts program. So I will turn this over to Michelle Mater. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's really my pleasure and honor to be able to introduce this amazing filmmaker, along with two really special guests, good friends and colleagues of mine who agreed to do this program with me tonight. So I just wanted to give you a little rundown about how we're going to operate tonight so you get an idea. My intention of doing this program was really to, come on down here, Jill. Come right here. My intention of doing this program tonight was really to introduce to the audience a part of this young man's repertoire, which doesn't get to be seen too often. Haile Gerima has been known for many years as the director, producer, writer of Sankofa, which was made in 1993. And many of you have also probably heard about his latest film release, Teza, which opened at Lincoln Plaza Center at the beginning of April. Not to worry, it's reopening on May 7th, right down the street at Village East Cinema. So we're going to be spreading the word about that as well. But Haile, as many of you may know, has been a force to be reckoned with in the independent film, cinema, and African-American and African Diaspora cinema particularly, for many, many years. So tonight is really going to be a representation of other works that you may not have heard about from him so that you'll want to learn more. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to watch some clips, we're going to talk, and then we're going to have Q&A from you, and we're going to watch some more clips and talk and have food. So, so joining me tonight are two of my good friends and colleagues that agreed to host with me this evening, Margot Jefferson, who, as you know, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning cultural critic, journalist, and author. She teaches right here at the Eugene Lang School, as well as at Columbia University. She's the author of her book on Michael Jackson, which was published in 2006, and was a staff writer for the New York Times, as well as her work having appeared in Salon, The Washington Post, Oprah Magazine, The Nation, and Vogue, just to name a few. She's also written and performed a solo theater piece called 60 Minutes in Negro Land. And that's our dear Margot Jefferson, who's joining us tonight. Absolutely. And Jill Nelson, who's been a working journalist for over 1 years. That's what I do. I don't know if you mind, I do that. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, Essence Magazine, the Washington Post, The Nation. These two sort of follow each other, don't they? Ms. Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, and the Village Voice, to name a few. Jill was also a staff writer for the Washington Post magazine during its first years of existence and was named the Washington, D.C. Journalist of the Year for her work there. She is the best-selling memoir, Volunteer Slavery, My Authentic Negro Experience, which won an American Book Award. She's also the author of Straight No Chaser, How I Became a Grown-Up Black Woman, and the editor of Police Brutality, an anthology which was published in 2000. Her first novel, Sexual Healing, was released in June 2003, and her nonfiction, Finding Martha's Vineyard, African-Americans at Home on an Island, was published in May 2005 by Random House. Her second novel, which, I don't know, it's running a close second to Volunteer Slavery, is my favorite book of yours, Let's Get It On, was published by HarperCollins in June 2009. So let's welcome Jill Nelson. And Mr. Gerima, what can I say? Dear friend, longtime colleague, he was called by Variety magazine one of independent cinema's chief chroniclers of the African-American and African Diaspora experiences. He is an independent filmmaker who has served as Distinguished Professor of Film at Howard University since 1975. He is perhaps best well known as the writer, producer, and director of the acclaimed 1993 film, which I mentioned earlier, Sankofa. Mr. Gerima, come say a few words for us.
Well, you know, first I just want to say I'm humbled by these two sisters, not only their work, but their principle and integrity that I'm perfectly aware of and have always felt inspired, and to be positioned with them. You know, film is an easy world. Just outside the money, it's an easy, just make film. You don't have to be intellectually anything, just make a movie. These folks write. Writers are another craft, and I think the most powerful, still powerful weapon for those of us who are still reading. I'm really humbled. I just want you to know that first, and I hope I'll make sense sitting next to them. And thank you again, Michelle. I have, I think, two more things here to serve. And yeah, and it's very for me encouraging to be endorsed by a very, I would say, an important school that is a challenge to most of this traditional schools. The new school, its name itself scares a lot of people. I don't know if you know this, but new school, what does that mean? It's like, what are we, the old school? And so I'm very, very proud, and thank you, Michelle, for working hard to get me into this position. But I also feel that those of you who've come to hear me, you say Haile, who's Haile, and I'm always amazed how most of you honor me when I am in some place, and not having the name that other folks who deserve public, and also work. Mine is so small for whatever the reason is maybe 11 films, but I'm really given beyond my service the kind of honor you are doing to leave the cafe shops, the beer halls, the weather like today, to come to one here, to this dislocated foreigner. It is really, I'm blessed, and thank you for coming, and I hope it would be a very interesting evening for you too. It will be for me, certainly. Thank you.
I just need to say a couple of thank yous, which I've neglected to do earlier on. These programs always take much more behind the scenes than you ever want to know about. And there are three people here in the audience who I must acknowledge, without whose help I could not have done this. Pam Tillis, who is never in the room when I get to say this. Thank you so much, Pam, for all your help. Just wave, please. Everybody needs to know Pam is our Director of Public Programs here at the New School. She's up here in the front. She won't ever disclose herself. She's right here. Alexandra McDougald, who is Haile's left and right arms back there in the back. And Hannah Fidel. Hannah is one of our media studies students. She's been helping with all the Hirshon events. Hannah, raise that hand of yours. She's all the way in the back in the yellow. That's her. She's been amazing as well. And we have Sylvan from AV, who's always helpful. Fabian, who's shooting for us. Everybody whose work goes into these things, it's an amazing labor of love. So first we're going to take a look at 3 clips. The first one that you're going to see begins with Child of Resistance, which is Haile's film from 1972. Then we're going to take a brief look at Bush Mama, which was the next film in 1976. And then we're going to end that section of the clips with Harvest 3000, which was also produced in 1976. And then we'll pause, have a discussion. You guys can ask questions, and then we'll go on to the next. So, first things first. Session 1, Haile Gerima.
Walls. Turn the walls between concrete. Life walls. Damn it. Modern dungeon. Modern dungeon. Breathing in between funky walls. What a life. I'm not the first. Me and my people are in this plantation dungeon. I'm not the only one. Why? Why is it? Damn white fools, don't they know? They don't even question. Number, yeah. More blacks are behind these bars. European man never examines himself, never throughout history, never examines himself. Instead, it's a black man. It's always the black man's fault. Man from the moon, what does he know? Doesn't even question himself. He's just the man from the moon.
Abort that baby. Tie your tubes and stay that way. Did you see it? Bring it here.
Looking sad and all alone. Sitting by the telephone. No one's at home. She hangs her head and cries. And says, why? Why can't I have my child? Oh, oh, oh. Welfare sister. Welfare sister. Hey, Bush mama.
Hey, Luann's mama. Guess what I got for you today?
What you got?
Got a poster
Oh. Where'd you get that in?
from the demonstration.
What demonstration?
Going down the street down there. Oh, where's Luann?
I don't know.
Oh, hi, baby.
Hi,
Hi.
what you got for us, Andy?
Oh, I just got back from the demonstration. Remember the march? This was the brother I told you about. Pig shot and killed him. Stanky pig.
Got us a big poster, huh, Andy?
Yeah. See the bullets? One here, one here, here, all over.
Hey, Andy, can I another day want to make coffee for Mom? Told you, Mom, I was coming, so I'll make you coffee.
Angie,
Come over here and read this letter for me.
Oh, you got a letter from TC, huh? Dorothy, hang on. I'm certain I'm going to make my parole. It won't be long, and I'll be out until, you know, he can't write. I'll be out until then. Just hang on, baby. We'll be together soon, and then everything will be all right. Hey, the last time you were up, you looked tired. After you left, I couldn't get your face out of my mind. If you're worried about us being together, don't.
Baby, just hang on, you hear? And another thing, if those welfare suckers are still hassling you about that abortion shit, don't let them. I mean, even if the worst comes, baby, and they cut off that welfare shit, then move to some other place. Baby, you know I'll send you whatever I collect working here. I mean, as far as the money, baby, I have no use for it here. And the books, well, the brothers give me. We pass them from one to another, so don't worry about that. Whatever I got, I'll send you. Baby, you know, I'm studying hard. I've been putting a lot of broken things in my past together, so I'll have a concrete foundation from where I'm coming. And it is you who will help me to where I'm going. I know how to govern my future when I come out. I mean, if I come out alive. Because they'll kill a brother a year the moment one starts to see. They don't give a damn if one stays blind, since that is death within itself and don't pose a threat to the decadent society. But once you start to see, baby, the light, the truth, then they cut it by shooting you down, though that will kindle many other lights. But baby, they always reacted irrational. They never knew or had the wisdom to overcome problems that face mankind. They always went about it the wrong way, since they are blinded within the desperate motive of profit. I'm sure in a short time, that'll sound different. But being behind bars one day, baby, is just as long as 10. Now, this stone-headed white boy, a robe-button uniform just passed by my cell. He looked down on me confidently, and I smiled, of course. A light smile. I mean, that's the only way I could smile to the sucker. Now, you see, this white boy to guard niggas is within his blood. His father was a guard, and his father's father was a guard, and his father's father was a guard. So this white boy is proud, and he tells it loud. And I bet you if we go down to his generation line, his roots, is maybe overseer, and we still the son of the slave. Yeah, that's what I inherited, all of us. Oh, baby. Baby, I don't know what's coming over me. I just guess it's the walls. I guess they're finally getting to me. I mean, the only way I can release it, Dorothy, is by writing to you. The only friend I have on the face of this earth. You know, I keep saying that I'll write you about something else. But baby, I don't know what. Baby, I guess I'll close this letter. But before I go, I just want to say, don't worry about me. Since I am in general very optimistic about making it out of this hole, okay? Just take care of yourself.
አንቺ አባቴ ይርሻውን ጀመረ።
ገና ለሊት ነው። ገና ሳይነጋ
ምን አለሽ?
ገና ለሊት ነው ሳለኝ እያለ ደስ ገና ሳይነጋ
በይጃውን ከብቶችን እገጂ በደንብ አድርገሽ። አንድ ከብት የጠፋ እንደሆነ አንድ ፍየል የጠፋ እንደሆነ ኋላ አይሆን። በፍጥነት ቶሎ በይ። አንድ ከብት ደግሞ ሰው ሳር ገብቶ የታገተ እንደሆነ ዋጋሽን ታገኛለሽ አንቺ። ዝም ብሎ መብላት መጠጣት ብቻ አንድ ስራ መስራት የለም እና አባቷ ከእናቷ ተወዝቀው መከራ ነው።
አየሩ በዚህም በዚያም ገብቶ እየተጋጨ ወደ እየፈለገበት ይበተናል። ውሃውም ወራጃችን የምንጠቀምበት በዚህ ገብቶ ወደዚህ ብሎ ይሄዳል። የምንጠቀምበትን አየር የሚያጣሩት እጽዋት ደግሞ ከዚህና ከዚህ እንደ ለምለም ሆነው ይገኛል። እንግዲህ ዘመናዊ ቤት ይለዋል። ይሄ ነው ዘመናዊ ቤት ማለት ነው። ወዳጄ ጣሊያን ይህን ሰርቶ ሄደ። ስዋጋላቸው የነበሩት ዘመዶቼ ነጣ ነጣ እያሉ ለራሳቸው ሲገለገሉብኝ ነጣ እያሉ ሲገለገሉብኝ ከቆዩ በኋላ ደሜን አፍሼ አጥንቴን ከስክሼ ያቆየሁትን ምድር ቀምተው እዚህ ዘመናዊ ቤት እንድቆይ ተደረገ። ለመሆኑ ኧረ እንደው በሩ በዚህ ክፍት ነው፣ በዚህም ክፍት ነው። ሌባ እንዴት የለም? ሌባ ለምን አይሰርቅም? ለምን ሌባ የለም? ዕቃችን ሁሉ ይሄ ጠፍርና እንጨት ተጣብሮ የሚያጋድመና አልጋ ጠንክሮ እንደዚህ ቀጥ ብሎ ዘላለም የቆየው እስካሁን ድረስ ለምን በሌላ ሌባ አይወሰድም? ሌባ የለም። ምክንያቱም ከዚህ ቤት ቁልፍና ፍርሃት የሚባሉ ነገሮች ፈጽሞ የሉም። ምንም የሉም። ቁልፍና ፍርሃት ከዚህ የሉም። ይሄ ከቶ ነው ያደረግናት። እናንተ አሳዳጊ የበደላችሁ የተረገማችሁ እስቲ ከቤታችሁ በጥሰት አቡና በቁጥረን አላስደብቃችሁ እዚህ የመርጋጋ ያልተቀጣ የባለጃሪ ፍልድው እዚህ የታባሉ ስዳታየ ለመግቢያ አጠጣት አትቅጣ
Everybody comfy? So this is the part I like the most because I get to ask the first question. But don't worry, we're going to get to you, so make sure you do save your questions. And I'm sure my esteemed colleagues up here will have something to ask as well. Haile, I just want to first start off a little bit, have you talk about how your work really seemed to chronicle closely the mood, the temperament of the times in the late 60s and early 70s here in the States, particularly in the Black community. And you were a recent transplant then yourself. How did you capture that so well and so vividly and so with such perspective?
That's the hardest one to start with. First, can I say a few things?
Absolutely.
First? Yeah, first I just want to say, do not be deceived in terms of my comments, my responses. They are improvised. Nothing. I would not tell you that I have thought about these things all my life, and they're just imperfect attempts, and also it sounds, when I talk about film, it sounds so interesting, and then it's very hard to validate that in the film. So the contradictions in my life is how much what I try to do, what I talk about, and how my films fall short of those propositions. But nevertheless, these are the kind of entitlements I have carved out for myself to usher my growth, my constant growth. And so when I speak about film, oftentimes confidently, and then you say, well, where's that in the film? You're entitled. And so that's the first one. The other one is the man you're hearing singing on The Sound of Harvest, that's my father. He was a playwright. It's a play he wrote. He wrote plays about his historical dramas, and he does musical dramas. Never knew Shakespeare, never knew Molière, nor the American Broadway. He was just completely an Ethiopian, came out of the traditional school in Ethiopia. But he did a lot of musical dramas when I was growing up. And those are the very few things. And then to say, in terms of, the film, I don't know if it would redress your question, but it has a lot to do with most of the actors that come into my film are collaborators. I want you to know that, because I go out of my way for days to choose people who could collaborate in making this molding I'm trying to do from idea to final project. And so most of the actors, especially the sister you saw, Barbara Oh,
yeah.
she's a very important icon in our independent film then. And in fact, the way I came across from her, with her, was she was playing Angela Davis in the inner cities in LA. And so she was what you would consider in the community acting already. And so the person who knew my script, who was also a filmmaker, I don't know if you've seen his film Passing Through, Larry Clark, he suggested her. And when we met, we just fused together. Now, the script that you saw her, the first one, not in Bushma, but the first one you saw, it was a dream I had when Angela Davis was apprehended in New York, I think, on television. And that night I dreamt, and then I tried to say, can a dream be made into a movie? And that's what I attempted to do there. And so that brings me to the whole, your issue of, how do if I succeeded, and I know it's very complex. The African-American community gets missed if arrogantly is looked at. And oftentimes foreigners only see broken parts of African-American life. I was that in Chicago, and I was a victim of that perspective myself. And as I told a few people, I was running away at the same time, gravitating for my own survival into the African-American community, because I couldn't take racism in any form. I was never, raised to take it. And so I felt I was completely unprepared to fight racism when I did gardening in the outskirts of Chicago to pay for school, because I was not this, Kennedy's and Haile Selassie's arrangement of scholarship Ethiopian students. Nobody supports theater or film. If you have to study medicine, doctor, agriculture to get any grants. So I did gardening in a lot of suburban, from Skokie to Evanston before I hit Los Angeles. And people, I think, in my kind of background, I think those areas gave me the best university. And then as I was about to collapse, because I couldn't take racism, I just hid in the black community and just identified for my own survival, and then learned the vocabularies of the culture of the African-American community that in fact transformed me to even get back. Because when I left Ethiopia, I was not to go back to Ethiopia. I wanted to disappear into this thing called America. So even for all the work I'm doing in Africa, it has a lot to do with what I was nurtured, the kind of nurturing I received from the African-American community. And so first, African-Americans are undermined to all foreigners. We know it in advance before we come here. I remember newspapers, official newspapers represent, I remember Kwame Ture. Kwame Ture was in a local newspaper when he was Stokely Carmichael. And black people were considered or presented as if they were ungrateful to America and trying to block civilization. And so it's like you say, oh, who are they? And the other part of it, a lot of people don't know this, is in the time I came, African Americans never came from Africa. This is also the kind of orientation I have. So African Americans were this cloned race from the plantations, and somebody you want to get away from. And so in 2-3 years, my own situations, I was majoring in acting, and I was cast at Goodman School of Drama next to the other black people I was running away from. They were lampposts and chairs, and Romeo and Juliet's are white people. I wanted to be Romeo and Juliet, regardless of my English problem. And here I was located. When they did me good, they would cast me with black people and Native, if there was one single Native American, at least in LA. And so you are trying to get away from this ghettoized race. I remember, how many of you know After the Fall? Mm-hmm. Okay. In that play, we were, what I call park benches, homeless. And Romeo and Juliet are dancing all over the wall, like Marilyn Monroe's character, and they were going up and down. Throughout the play, we'll be sitting, and can you imagine? It's kind of a metaphor of African Americans cannot industriously participate in America, but sit and watch, regardless of the brilliance of their mind. And so in the play, I was like located with these folks. So every time I was complaining, a sister, she's around still, Ramona is her name, fantastic actress. Now she curates museums. She gave me Facing Mount Kenya and said, brother, maybe. I think she thought I was lost when she met me. And so she gave me, that's the first African book I read. And so I'll just, in short, just say, my whole education, I'm sorry to say this, but my whole education and orientation to retool myself, resurrect myself was, possible in the African-American community. I just disappeared in that community. And it was for my own survival, but at the same time, I was humanized, enlightened, and then said to me, it validated me. Black people are the first people I did this film, Child of Resistance. They were crying. I didn't even know I was a filmmaker. I went to Oakland to show. Some sisters wrote poetry, and they hugged me. And I said, oh, maybe I'm a filmmaker. So even the idea of I was never raised, that's what I was saying, when you guys walk here, I grew up in a town, small town. For me, this is too much. I was never raised to get half fraction of this. And I don't crave for it also. And so from the kind of society I came from, and when black people said, you are our filmmaker, they never discriminated me. They never told me I was a foreigner. They embraced me. And then that is where I come from. Now, this is not to say, I always have to remember that people who worked with me brought their whole aura into the project. I was not the only person about the Angela Davis emotional situation that I was going through. My script responded to people who wanted to collaborate. The other thing I want to say also is, at the time I was going to film school, the African-American prison culture and knowledge and intellectual output did affect college people, white or black, a great deal. It was a time when they were writing some of the brilliant literature in America, in my view. And so most filmmakers, most intellectuals, not many people give credit to prisoners. You are more, for let's say the New York Times, you would sound better if you mentioned somebody. Like I know black filmmakers who in the closet would say, you are my influence, and then on public, on BET, they'll say Orson Welles, because who knows Haile? I don't blame them. If they say Haile, it doesn't validate their film background. So for me, these are I don't know if it confuse you, but this is where I come from. I respect people, not only just anybody who wants to come see my movie. I prepare a lot, I rewrite a lot out of that respect. And then when I present it, you're entitled to go leave it or take it. This is the way it is.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you started making films, what films were you influenced by, positively or negatively, that were by or about African Americans, people of the diaspora? Were there films that?
Well, let me tell you, at UCLA, everything we saw, from Casablanca to Mae West movie, we have all these black characters that come, and most of the black students want to go under the table, under their chair, until the film finishes. I think for me, other Charles Burnett and other people have to be asked. For me, I think at the time we went to film school, there was this political climate in America. The anti-Vietnam War movement is also, present, and schools were in turmoil, universities were in turmoil. But I would say the most powerful films that really touched all of us at that time came from Cuba, Latin America, and Africa. They were just coming into the school at that time because everybody was in search of other. Is film always going to be just this Hollywood idea? Even in Latin America, if in Argentinian cinema they had Cary Grant in America, then they have a look-alike Cary Grant in Argentina. That's how movies were made. At the time we're coming, even the Latin Americans, the Cinema Nova in Brazil, they were saying, let's not make Kodak film. It was the biggest. Let's not make these films. In fact, a gentleman sent me a quotation from Globa Rocha who said this in a very more incisive. But again, those are the influence. Now, when I'm coming again into film school, we revolted so much. We didn't want to see, respect any Euro-American cinema, even the good ones. It's later on after we sobered and leveled off, and when we got teaching positions, we had to teach, then we start seeing some.
There's that. There's always that.
Yeah.
What about Sweetback or Shaft or?
No, when Sweetback came back, we were turmoiled because I was personally very uninterested. I was angry at the film. I remember Superfly was also beating the hell out of us because here in the film school, we're trying to say, if black people did jazz, what do they do in film? If this is the standard they set in jazz, what should black people's cinema be? And at that time, Sweetback comes, and then the morality of it, this little kid and sex with the older lady, it just defied us, scrambled us a lot. And I've never digested that film. We were in total contradictions with that one, with Sounder came, we didn't go for it because we felt we felt, for example, there's a black man here in 1930-something, we're reading Paul Robeson, and the sharecroppers were so militant, and then here's a black man, suddenly one night, he can't live without a meat, and he resorts to stealing, and he misses shooting the raccoon. All this white framing of a story revolted us. And so we were responding in a very critical way, saying, why wouldn't the black guy shoot? Why should he have to miss if he has only one bullet? This logic of the way they organized this narrative devices were racist for us.
You mentioned jazz and the standards, and your rhythms, your everything is so non-traditional. Just the way Child of Resistance opens, you see the foot and then the bit of the sheet and the mattress, and the tones of every character's skin. Something that. Oh, I'm sorry. The tones, the slowness, as the camera moves past those hands in the prison, in Urban Bushwoman. But I'm interested in how you came to your aesthetic, and I'm wondering what jazz and other kinds of black music had to do with that.
Well, let me just tell you, I don't know if it answers. I'm not a good answerer, by the way, but I'll try. This is what, for example, take most nights as foreign students, if I was with African students at UCLA, and a Somalian was there, Ethiopians were there, etc., and Nigerian and South African. When we party, for example, from UCLA, when we leave, what do? Everybody would have a problem with this. We would be listening Malcolm X all night. Mm-hmm. Okay, now a lot of people don't know what has this got to do with the vocabulary of our profession. I think Malcolm, in fact, in teaching, if you show Malcolm X's speech, the way he organizes, he's the best filmmaker in town, the way he puts images together. Isn't it an image he captivated black people? Yes. In the way he juxtaposes images? And so, as filmmaker, for me, if I tell you, like, for example, George Jackson is a big teacher in my life because of the way he coins. Okay. Like the phraseology is so visual. I even feel completely insecure to even say he has influenced me because he's so in space age, in the way he juxtaposed two concepts. Yeah. So in filmmaking, if you want to exercise and do a lot of gymnastic to control and really transform your visual vocabulary, there are amazing mediums outside cinema, because the cinema pacifies us. Look at it. The first thing at UCLA, in fact, the whole Threeact, I'm sure maybe new school, don't be offended if you are a teacher in script writing, but one of the things that's killing even white American filmmakers is Threeact logic that came from the stage, which is it's hurting because innovative ideas and the individual temperaments get lost there. So when we were coming to school, I was telling the script writing teacher, I said, I don't want to learn your logic of your narrative logic. I respect you, but I don't want to study Threeact. I want you to first see how I write and counsel me. I didn't disrespect him. And he was happy because he was one of this Hollywood, what do you call it? He wrote The Exodus and he was considered communist. So he was what, white male or what?
Black.
Okay. Whitelisted. For example, we made an arrangement where I would go to his office, we'll have tea, and we'll just talk about my script of where I am wandering all over the place and paying attention to my own imperfect meandering to find my own narrative identity. He was very important, for example. Most teachers, we agreed we don't see eye to eye. For example, in the editing class, I went to the teacher, I said, all the semesters I'm watching, everybody's cutting gun smoke, you're molding people. I don't want to be molded. And he said to me, what do you propose? I said, I will shoot a black character and take over a Gunsmoke story. And then he says, you don't need editing class. So I just got grade, didn't take editing class. Now, but let me tell you also, for example, when they asked me to do a 3-minute commercial instead of deodorant selling, one time I did a short film called The Death of Tarzan. Because I was mentally killing the colonial territory he has in my mind. So it was like a mental killing. I mean, the school was completely watching it like it was a feature film when it showed. Because I was just looking, using film to respond to my own, instead of saying I want to make a film to her or him, make a film to exorcise my own situation. Because Tarzan in Africa has molded our minds a great deal. And so basically this, I don't know if this answers, that's why I'm very leery.
Very much so, and I love that it's writers who are doing this.
Yeah.
What about James Baldwin?
Well, it's later I came into James Baldwin. When we were coming, to tell you the truth, the militancy also did have some shortcomings, and that was it's after that when I left for Howard, I started reading all the way back to Chestnut and other folks from 1860.
Wow. Okay.
But before that, one of the biggest problem of some aspect of the Black Power movement or the Black Panther Party movement was sometimes out of the historical circumstances of responding to many, many forces, we sometimes shortchange the legacy of black people that could have been used to transform the cultural sphere. And that's why I think, for example, a lot of the black militancy was backward in literature. They were backward in culture. They didn't know cultural revolution was important. If a brother just wore a dashiki, that was an identity card. And so the nuances got lost because we didn't go to the literature that challenges,
Questions from the audience? No? Yes? Okay, hold on, let me read the mic.
Well, thank you very much. You're a treasure.
Thank you.
My question is, how old were you when you came to this country?
21. Oh, okay. 21. But I can't tell you, outside my father's play, I didn't know my own history. This is what a lot of people do not know. I did not know my history. I did not know, in terms of black people, in terms of slavery, for example, was never in our educational system. In fact, when I was doing Sankofa, we used young people from the school Nkrumah put together. And those kids came to help us do the movie, and they start crying because they never knew. They're 5 minutes from the fort, the slave fort. They didn't know what went down there. And Ghana is like 360 of the slave forts lived in Ghana. The ruins are everywhere. And the kids never was educated.
But you grew up in Ethiopia?
Yeah.
So I'm just surprised. I thought you didn't learn your own history and you grew up in Ethiopia? That surprises me.
Well, let me tell you the history. Ethiopia, is one of it's a very interesting country. It has its own traditional school. It has, principal languages of instructions and form of government, an empire that traces itself, back. But, when the Italian occupied Ethiopia for 5 years, there was a guerrilla fighting going on. And the British came in solidarity with the Ethiopian force. And they were trying to recolonize Ethiopia. So at that time, at least the elite that came with the emperor, who was banished, or he banished himself to London, were designing the school. So at the time the Italians left, the Ethiopian educational system, out of this desperate need to modernize Ethiopia, to respond in a more modernized way to invaders, we dropped a lot of it's like all the baby, the water, everything was thrown. So the British designed school became automatically about the British history, Magna Carta to everything, and Queen this, Charles X. And then Americans came as Peace Corps because the emperor was trying to break from the British and went into the bosom of Roosevelt and Kennedy and Eisenhower. And then Ethiopian educational system became, I'm sorry to say it, but where 21-year-old Americans were coming to teach Ethiopians history. If you are like, you left from here, you're 21, and you're asked to teach history, what would you teach? You teach what you know. Exactly. And so it just backfired on us. I knew more, when I came to Chicago, to UCLA, I knew more about American history, even the stupidest part of like cherry trees and stuff. And the students would worry, where was I? Where did I grow up? And so this was the colonial experience of education, where our educational infrastructure was completely taken over on this desperate attempt to modernize Ethiopia. The elite in Ethiopia, the international elite together, the synthesis is a series of problems in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Yes, hold on one second. Get back here.
You seem to use a lot of close-ups in the scenes that we saw. And you talked about working in collaboration with the actors. How did that actually work? Do you film a scene and then you and the actors look it over and then decide how you're going to do it again? How many takes did you use in doing some of those scenes?
Whoa, at that time, especially, all the black filmmakers and the Chicanos at that time, the Chicanos and Asian students at UCLA, and there were a few Native Americans. One of the things we were also concerned was what happens after we leave school, equipment-wise, finance, etc. And so one of the things we're known for is our ratio, the 1-to-1 ratio. Even when I went to Ethiopia, in the most critical period to shoot Harvest 3,000 Years, I did 1-to-1. I couldn't even go back to shoot because there was a revolution going on.
What's a 1-to-1 ratio?
1-to-1, just once I shoot, that's all I got. I don't have nothing. And so what we do is, again, this is what we cultivate earlier because of our economic situation. We shot precisely to the point, and often what we do is I can talk while the camera is going, while the person is acting, because I always make a contract with the actors. I will speak to you, but stay in character and don't turn and look towards me, these kinds of things. And for non-actors, another kind of instructions. And so what we do is we ride the camera to do all the work, and the actors just stays in character while I get all the shots within this master idea.
How did you plan it? You said you started with a script. So how did you plan the scene if you were just going to have the one shot at it?
Well, you have, for example, in what you saw in the dolly, there's a dolly there. Yeah. There's the person. By the way, everybody you saw there as an extra with his back even, the front even, all these were the black filmmakers who wanted to be filmmakers at UCLA. So all the extras there are the filmmakers themselves. But in terms of what we do is we actually practice before shooting, okay? The actress, I wouldn't want her to waste her emotional, account. What we do is just practice the physical movements, and then once we go, it's one take. Well,
Thank you very much.
Again, there are cases, if I did two takes or 3 takes, is rare, but that's also was possibility.
Here, we get one question.
What do you think about broadband, the new digital video, and the internet as a new medium of distribution or forms of publishing or identity or agency? What do you think about new media? Do you see that as something that furthers the tradition that your filmmaking is in, or is it something that, well, that's the question.
Well, let me just say this. I don't know. I'll tell you I don't know, but I'll tell you how reactionary I am towards this, especially black folks going to voodooism when, for example, the video came, black people were saying, oh, now it's going to be easy, we're going to make more films, etc. What I have learned is, regardless of the shifting of technologies, in the end, capital is decisive. In the end, it doesn't matter what revolutionary technology comes to disseminate it, to transmit it, to carry it, to capital is decisive. There's no way out without it. Now, I guess this is where, for me, the black elite in Africa and here remains completely unprepared to step forward to be part of the global force in the kind of cultural consumptions of our children are doing. We do not step and say, the salad bar should be more democratic culture. I mean, the salad bar of culture should be more democratic. Little kids should see culture, so they also realize they too can be history makers, or the capacity to be history maker is not segregated by race. These are luxuries. Black kids always, at childhood beginning, watch everything that says your nose is ugly, your hair is bad, even by black filmmakers. Black kids are at the mercy of racist silent images. My daughter, crossing a magazine shelf in a station, watches all these images that completely challenges her at the wrong age. We don't have any salad bar to defend them, to protect them. So it's not black people only. Non-whites need to see images that they too can come up with idea. They're not passive spectators of white invention only, which decapitates the nerve endings of individual kids. And so that's the battle for me, that kids should see and they should realize they too are history makers. This is what hurts me a lot, to tell you the truth, that black kids in the inner city in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, black men and women completely out of the industrialness opportunity in standing in storefronts and all day doing work, etc., just standing and standing. Then how unemployed opportunities, how industrious they're not, and then how the courts are organized effectively to railroad them all the way to prison. And so these things cannot be flimsily dealt by all groups. They should be tackled. I think culture should interfere into this visual booby traps and propose images that contradict the official language.
Last question, then we're going to go to the next set of clips.
Yeah, hi. This just deals with your working style, that's all. Do you use storyboards and script? Do you follow a tight script when you create your projects?
Well, again, for me, I hate storyboards. And let me tell you why. It freezes my idea. What I do is I outline my daily task, either at night after I finish shooting, it depends if we're shooting day or night, whatever. I outline my task, I memorize them, I walk pre the shooting. If you saw my camera at one place, if you saw my camera here, I assure you I have been there at least minimum 100 times before I take any crew, any expenditure. I go there, I stand, I look, and I go. Yet, when the equipment comes, I'm not married to it again. I could betray it any minute. But I do my homework so I'm not behind the bulldozing culture of production where you are pacing, everything is costing you, etc. And so I don't like that, storyboard idea. It freezes it for me. For me, going to that location, studying it, and then be prepared to catch the magic of what's being given to you. In Sankofa, a lot of people, except a sister from Harlem said to me, you know, don't ever think you made that movie by your power. There was more things working. I do believe that is also there, because how else, if you're so arrogant and organized, you're not open for many vibrations that are real, in my view. In fact, Kathy Collins actually civilized me in this kind of texture. We used to argue walking for miles in New York when we got together about her. She was very spiritually advanced in how there are other things beyond now. You know, Paul Robeson could be here listening, laughing. I wish I could talk and tell these people. They're not saying new things, you know? And so how do you go to a location, you have all these vibrations. The individual actors are bringing their aura. The crew's bringing their aura, all this commitment. Then the location is saying to you, I am also a living thing. And then if you're not ready to improvise and change your mind from yesterday to today to go with today, you are actually arresting the evolution of, you know, many things you can discover that you never prepared for.
And on that note, we're going to go to the next section of clips, which are only about 6 minutes long, and then we have time for some more questions. Okay?
I think she was.
Sylvan, you guys want to sit? Sure. Yeah.
America, Trinidad, Jamaica, Akawaje. Moye mama kele biakate. Afite wo biada. Mi kanya ka afite wo. Chukpon kron. Danye chwachi abie. Nyenye bie, nyenya bie. Bla o. Oye. Boni mo je bie. Ko. Oye. Kwa ko hun. Ko. Kwa ko hun. Oye ko. Jemi lo ya. Oye.
Don't hurt it.
Yeah. Sankofa. Go.
He is called Sankofa. He's a self-appointed guardian of this castle and claims to be communicating with the spirit of the dead with his drums. Every morning, very early, he welcomes the sunrise with his drum right at the foot of the final exit. Casting his net across the ocean, he claims he is lulling the spirit of the dead back across the ocean, mending. And then ushers the sunset again, facing the west, hitting his drum, counting the count of the day. Right here.
Sankofa, go, go. Ubana no na. Ubana, nyamai, ubana no na. Go. Wait.
Now, the upper level of the castle used to be the governor's residence. In fact, we see here the grave of the British governor and his wife, right in the center of the castle. Well, now we go to the dungeon where the slaves were kept. Please watch your step. It's a bit slippery.
these holding places, they used to pack thousands of people until they collect enough to fill the ships. And this is where they were kept, right here. And even at the time when they are ready to take them out to the docks, they take them through this underground long tunnel that goes straight to the final exit, where the canoes will be waiting for them. And mind you, some of them will be here for over a year. And most of the time, this took place at night. Yes, they were taken out of here at night. The shouts, the cries of desperation is still remembered along this coastline. Watch your step. You have the Portuguese, you have the Swiss, the Dutch, and finally the British all over the coast.
We had many emperors before, but Menelik was the only one. And his empire was the first one to command international recognition. Other emperors conquered, other emperors acquired new territory, but this was, on their part, local victory, and their claims were local claims. For Menelik had a greater stature on account of the victory. I mean, the story of Theodorus, the story of Johannes, is the story of many early resistance movements throughout Africa. All of them tried. In a few cases, they won decisive battles, but nobody won the war in the sense that no victory elsewhere in Africa culminated in independence. What happened in the Sudan, what happened with the Zulus, showed tremendous gallantry. And the enemy was defeated at the battle, but the enemy was not politically defeated. Independence was never an outcome of any of these struggles. And in that sense, Adwa is a singular exception. It was an enduring defeat for a European power.
አልሞታትም ገና ያችን መከረኛ እናቴን ሳላይ እምቢ አልሞትም አልሞትም
አይዞ አይዞ ና ና
ተነስ እንጂ ይላል እኮ ተሰማኝ ተነሳ ተነሳ
አባ መጣ ከጦሩ ማመጣሽ ካፈሩ ለግስ ጫማ ላገትሽ ማተብ ይዘውልሽ መደረሴ
ልጅነቴ በገሃ
የሚወጋህ እያያ በለው እያያ በለው የተረፈ ልጆች ባረልብላ እያያ በለው እያያ በለው
የመንደር ልጆች እንቆቅልሽ ሲጫወቱ ይታየኛል።
ያው በድንታችሁ በድን መሀለኛው ነፍስ አድን የደስተዋት
ደስታ ቅቤ
ኧረ አላገኛችሁትም አገሬን ስጡኝ ምንዝሮ ምንዝሮን አግኝቼም ተጎድቼ ላይኛውም ጎጎ ታችኛው ምጣድ መሀለኛው እንጀራ
ወቅልህ እግሯን አበጥራ ገበያ የምትወጣ እንቆቅልህ ሰዕድ አገኘኋት ስመለስ አጥተዋል
ዝናብ
ፍቅርሳ
አረበኛይቱ ዝም ብላችሁ ሀገር ስጡኝ
ህይወት
ሰዕድ አገኘኋት ስመለስ አጥተዋል ልጅነት
I had to give them a little taste of Teza, just so that they know that they have to go see it, right? Yes. When it comes back on May 7th, right down the street at the Village East Cinema. So, question.
Well, I have a question, which is if you could talk a little bit about the, so many of your films have the central characters female.
Mm-hmm.
And where about those choices and the sensibility that brought those choices about, especially in a culture here where African-American women are disappeared, demeaned, played by men in drag, and where for the most part our images are controlled not by us but by males and very often by gay males.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could talk about that.
Whoa. You know, I'll tell you, when when I write, like for example, when the idea comes, it's never, for me, it's something organic. I mean, it's like you have to know, I guess there's certain things even, the kind of, the kind of culture I think I still have, hopefully, that I have not lost from my home, is really there is, without, paternalizing, because there's also false mythologizing of women, which could also go into exoticism. But for me, I think women are considered the originators of life. And there's no life without my mother. There's no life, my father never had life without his mother. In his name, the way he's named, and the way, how long the pregnancy took, and his mission was given from the day of labor that, my grandmother went to have him. And then around the fire, primarily around the fire, it's my grandmother who was shaping my storytelling, and she was also traditionally a learned grandmother, and she's also very political in the sense that she was not for the Emperor Haile Selassie, but the one he deposed. And so my father had a belief, once a person is in the throne, you respect the symbol, not the individual. That difference, for example, has always amazed me between my grandmother and her son. And so, but in America, I got in trouble, to tell you the truth. For example, when Nunu says, I raised you with these breasts, in a society where breast itself has been so lost in the sexual phraseology and obsession of the American culture, you get lost, and so I got in trouble a few times, and even a brother, he walked, when I was editing this film, he's a filmmaker, a mature guy, he came and he looked at this scene that you saw of Sankofa, and he said, couldn't you get a better butt than her? He said to me. And apparently he was looking, for him, he wanted a firm breast. For me, I was more again into the mother, the violated mother. He was going more for, so I have been in trouble many times, and it has a lot to do with cultural notions. I think what I like about my country, for example, my tradition, not all Ethiopia, but just the specific area I come from, I think even now I'm reading a lot in South Africa how life began, and man came later in this whole, the traditional concept of how life began is the woman that comes in. And so women were warriors, they were queens in my country. In fact, one of the toughest women who told the Italians, when the Italians, Tahitu, Minilik's wife, she told, the Italian guy came and says, do you know, for us to accept your term, what would the world think about us? And she said to him, what do you want the world to think about us if we accept your white terms? She's very equal, and when they were leaving, she's the one who said, wash their shoes, not even a single soil should stick to their shoes and go out of our country. So you don't, there's this. Now, in modern Ethiopia, women have been, I think, again, the kind of Western culture that has come about, women have also now, for good or bad, entered by and large in the sexual vocabulary of their humanity instead of a human. Like, for example, if you take the man, usually, you can see in Hollywood films, if you take the man out, the woman doesn't exist. It goes back into the rib and the Adam and rib idea. And it's a lot of, we men suffer from that, Right. And I have been lucky, actually. I've been embraced, but I don't, when I write a script, I have characters who carry my story, and I'm more obsessed about that.
There's a reference in Bush Mama when she's in prison and she says this is a modern day dungeon. And then we fast forward almost 20 years to Sankofa when there's another black woman in a dungeon. How did you know you were going to make that film almost 20 years later? How did you know?
I don't know. I don't. This is what I'm. That's why I didn't want to be accountable, because a lot of the things I can't explain. Even I'll tell you. For example, when I wrote Sankofa. It used to be called Nunu. One summer I couldn't get a job as a foreign student, so I said I can only rationalize one summer to pass without writing. So I had this story about Nunu, an African mother, and Joe, her American son. That's all the beginning seed. So I just stationed myself at UCLA on the 4th floor at that time, where it's all about slavery. So I read and read and read just to know, the top stuff. Of course, if I made that film then, I always said black people would stone me to death. What I did is left it always going back every year to the script, every year to the script. It's when I start moving through the corridors of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, into Florida, and up into Louisiana, Natchez, and I start enter into the caves in Louisiana where black warriors used to fight, the untold story of American Maroons. I was just being given suggested ideas, so my script start growing on me out of just walking. And then when I walked in Jamaica, it just became more real. And so a lot of times, what has happened, I think, is to even history in the way they did not document the Africans who fought from day one. They're not documented, or although they're documented now, we're discovering. But the imaginators, the filmmakers, do not. They buy into the idea that that says black people are freed people, which means by somebody else. The self-agency is always abstracted. Even at that time when I was doing the initial research, my script was reflecting this whole idea that there was necessary to have a good white person. Not that say there was no good white people, but to relinquish the idea of wanting to be free to someone else, I couldn't swallow it. But then I have to get the facts to make that also reality. But the initial part is really that from day one, black people fought. It's not contestable. Now, even this Maroon project that I wanted to do, we found now, just in the Dismal Swamp, for over 100 years, black people were waging guerrilla warfare in the whole vicinity. In that area, people like Max Roach are born in that whole. Yeah. Even culturally, Paul Robes, you find a lot of militancy inherited. Some of it stopped during this, when the Civil War broke. People joined two groups, the British versus the Americans, but an amazing history is untold that would say to people, yes, it will even put in proportion. For example, the Underground Railroad is the favorite story history of all, I would say, elite class in America. Both whites and blacks, they feel good, they have wine and dine. But the other one that started to fight on his own, her own, defies the idea of, I freed you. To me, it would level off everything, including people who fought for just against slavery will be leveled off. But when you deny the principal agency of the African race in slavery from Brazil to here, that they initiated the opposition against slavery, not because it was oppressive, which I thought when I started writing it was because they were being flogged. Well, then at one point I said, how about if they're not, if they didn't get flogged, would they accept? Would I accept? Oh, I took TWA here, but would I accept? I'm giving you this kind of logic. Even naming, for example, the naming itself, in film scripts, slave 1, slave 2, slave 3, even on the waterfront, liberal writers, giant Negro is how a black character is identified. So you come into a film world that completely corroborates in the non-humanness. Because if you say, you never fought for your own freedom, which means you don't, then there's some enzymes missing that makes you less of a human. And so, Sankofa was culminating, liberating itself from the script that was pushing this idea of that black people didn't go to school, so therefore they couldn't free themselves. When in fact, some of for example, in the Dismal Swamp, there was Peter first, Peter second, and then there was Usman one, and at the same time there was an Usman in West Africa, Usman in the Caribbean, they were in the Dismal Swamp and Usman. This history was not available. I'm just trying to do a documentary on it. I'm now getting more facts on it. But when I was going into the territory, you knew the battle that took place because they were finding a lot of the artifacts.
Margot, your question?
Yeah, what do documentaries give you that making your other films don't? I noticed you've also done a documentary, which I have not seen, on Sterling Brown.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then there's Menelik, and now you're talking about this
The
documentary
Maroons,
you're
yeah.
envisioning.
But do you have money for that one?
I wish.
I'm kidding you. No, you know what? I don't approach it differently. I take it, it's a personal story. It should say something to me, even if it's I wouldn't do documentary because it's politically correct. But it has to give, because you can be creative if it's a story you're telling. And so I did, for example, the community approached me to do the film on the Wilmington 10. It was a political assignment. As it came to me, I said, if I'm going to be involved, I'm not interested in the Wilmington 10. I'm interested in their parents who raised them. So I changed the whole script and went into folkloric discovery of resistance in Wilmington, North Carolina. And that is the way I would respond. But if it doesn't tell a story, to me, politics is not enough. It does never transform anybody. Politically correctness is only momentary. It serves its purpose, but we have to exist still with culture. Now, for example, I didn't want them to show Teza because I would like you to really see how we shot them. It's not timed in the DVD. The skin, I'm very concerned. For example, when we did Sankofa, I've always, like all other filmmakers who are questioning this thing, I always felt makeup itself was Eurocentric. And a lot of people would say that's silly. No. But a lot of black people look funny in these makeups. When I went to Goodman School Drama, they were putting all these things on black actors, and I knew there was something wrong with this makeup. And so what I did in my case is, I don't ask for makeup. Black people don't need makeup. All they need to do is tan them, suntan them. And they're giving you the most radiating thing that you need in film.
So many
yeah,
tones.
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't have the money, but I had to take my actors to Jamaica a week early and roasted them under the sun to prepare them for the shoot.
I'm sure they didn't mind.
Yeah, because when I interview makeup people, I said, makeup I need is special effect makeup, like sweats, etc. But in terms of black people, they give an amazing registration for the film itself. What you have to do is make sure they are in touch with the sun, light.
And lighting, and the way
Yeah.
it's lit, they're lit.
Yeah.
Questions? Yes, hold on, let me bring you the mic.
You mentioned the pitfalls and constraints of the Threeact structure that you try to avoid in the film school. I was wondering if there's any approach to structure that inspired you as a filmmaker. Would it be surrealism? Would it be folklore? Maybe some revolutionary, filmmakers of the 20s like Eisenstein. Is there any kind of specific structure or rather approach to narrative that?
Well, when we went to film school, for good or bad, I want to say again, we just said Europe and America can teach us nothing. It has betrayed us. We felt, I look at Casablanca with my classmates. White kids are crying, we're angry because there's a black man who's carrying piano all over the place for the pleasure of white people. And we say, when will you have your own lover? When will you have your own story? Who are you? This is a very serious, schizophrenic audience position black people most often suffer. They go into a theater and automatically the black character is a doormat to entry to a story about the real people. And that hurts a lot, especially when you're young. And so we were angry all these third world people that came at this film school were angry the way film has depicted us, period. Especially Native Americans were destroyed, literally. So we felt at that time, like for example, all these classes, Western cinema, horror movie, that film schools thrive for, we just rejected. This has nothing to do with us. And so we started a film organization called Third World Cinema. We started bringing from Latin America, Cuba, Asia, and Africa films. Now, in this kind of situation, when you revolt, you miss a lot also because you're rejecting so many things. You shortchange yourself. I'll tell you, Eisenstein and all these things for me were not how I cut my teeth in film. It's when I started to teach, I said, oh, now I have to sound right. And then I start reading and studying this world cinema. But initially, we closed our mind literally to birth ourselves because, again, conventions, when you come from no tradition of cinema, as we walk into the film school, all the posters, white people. None of us look in there. We look illegitimate, we are insecure. We had a lot of psychological trauma in a white school. But this is not visible to the larger society. But we felt so, that's why we huddled together. And so when you huddle like that, then the influence, we cut it off. And I'm glad I did. For example, I'm glad I didn't take this editing class. I'm glad I didn't take the acting class. This woman taught, she used to say, the day Haile Gerima walks in my room, I'll faint. She would tell my friends. I never went to her class because I didn't think I needed that. What I needed was to empower my own narrative identity first and then be judged. Instead of first formula, let me be birthed first. Let me birth my identity first. So the struggle was based to write as I feel first and then critique it. Instead of, this is the structure, you choke your story in. It's in the bottle, you shove it in, you lose everything. What is then story about? All our different identity, our melody, our pace, and the way we look at the world, our nightmare are very, very interesting. They get lost because we are trying to make, most non-white filmmakers in America will tell you, they study like Bible, this Threeact formula, because that's the way the producer understands. Even in America, if you look at early cinema, they're very innovative. Different directors, their style was very perceptible. We can understand John Ford, etc. We know where they were coming. One came from Ireland, one was birthed in somewhere. They were bringing their identity. But over time, when producers, and especially lawyers, took Hollywood over, then it became, don't confuse me with the facts. Just tell me, where does she get shot? Where does she get married? Where does she die? And so it became this Threeact quickly for the producer to understand. And then it dumbed the audience expectations also. And so I think the identity of storytellers from different societies, even men and women have different identity in the way they tell a story. I can tell my father and my grandmother completely have different sensibility in the way. Even when they tell you the same story again and again, you're like this all the time. And so I do believe that in America, most human beings should start writing first and then take to a person who can explore the form they are bringing. Because nothing is born without a form in this planet. Yes, form and content is transformable, but the birthing, the initial birthing, however lopsided it is, it should come from me. And then the cleansing, the structuring, the pacing, the rhythming, it could go into a different doctoring level. But the immediate birthing, you should never interfere. In my students, for example, at Howard, I will not put formula on their face. I just tell them there's this kind of formula, there's this kind of world. How do you write? Where are you from? Where? Louisiana? Okay. Come again. Where? Do you have a grandmother? Do you have a grandfather? Was there a swing where she was telling you this story? I dig into them and I say, you're looking at a television story, but you have gold under your nose. Your story is powerful. I just saw a sister now, this morning, I was working on her script from Atlanta. You cannot believe how this woman brought a story from her neighborhood. And you have to take its own proposition to give it criticism. In America, in general, in film schools, it's from the top, you impose form on individual identities.
A question? Yes.
Hi. I just had a comment about the idea of the woman, the mother, the source of life. And I personally have grown up my whole life in India resisting or resenting that idea. And in India, of course, the idea is very strong, Mother India and mother this and mother that. But it also kind of reifies that notion so that there is a certain expectation, so, which is often literal, that you have to be a mother, you have to produce life. So if you're writing a book, or if you produce a play, you are not giving birth to anything, to an idea, or if you write a piece of music. But you're not affirming life, or you're not producing something, unless you literally produce life. And there are many of us who can just say you go to hell, but there are millions of people who cannot. So for me, I'm actually I'm not comfortable with the notion, so it's really a comment.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It has its drawbacks also. There's that aspect of it also. But I think for me, I am speaking just from where I came. This kid from a town, even the fact you honored me today here, I don't belong. I'm just improvising my life. I know my mother is not a breast for sex only. Even only doesn't exist. I mean, my mother is not a sexual object. My mother is a very, very interesting woman. And it's a mother who beat the hell out of me a lot because she had to curb the energy I had, which was could be self-destructive. And for me to retool my energy, because oftentimes black kids in different communities have energies that will completely challenge the society, and the society is unprepared to take. But if a kid finds his poetry, his something, or he would be retooling something. Now, in my case, my mother literally invented me. My father is only an intellectual encouragement. My mother is beyond that, and so I respond from that only. And it's not a universal. It's not a universal thing.
Last two questions.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Really a pleasure to listen to you again.
Thank you.
I really enjoy the emotional vocabulary of your films. I'm Ghanaian, my mother's Ashanti, my dad's Nzuma. I worked across Africa. One of the beautiful things for me about Sankofa was to see Elmina Castle and to recognize a place where I've put my feet. Like I've stood in the soil. Not physically, but I recognize it spiritually. The emotionality of it. That you put your hands on the walls and a whole place comes to life. And that those realities are always deadened because those stories are told by people who have no understanding, because how could you? That's just not your story. I'm not mad at that. I'm just saying the beauty of what you've done is to give the complexity of blackness a vocabulary, which it has lacked for so long. One of the other things I just wanted to comment before the question was that I learned through traveling through Africa and through my mother and through my grandmother that women are a political force across different African nations. That if you want to learn the political structure of a nation, you go to the market and you go to the beauty salon. It is a different reality about the way we're taught. But because you have a structure that's imposed across all cultures, black and white, that is the way the salon becomes a different space. Whereas for me, when you went to get your hair done, that's where you learn the politics of the day. People knew their history, they knew the present political structure. If you were in Kenya, the women that cleaned your hotel, they were the political storytellers. Mm-hmm. That's who you sat down at their feet and listened to them because they had the stories. And you learn that. You learn that from a young age. Mm-hmm. And so I wondered, you see that in Teza as well, I wondered for you about the transformation for your emotional vocabulary as a filmmaker, and how that has transformed you over the years of making films, and the stories that you still want to tell that have been a challenge for you. That's the other question. And the third was, what is the greatest obstacle in the choice of telling a story? What is the hardest truth that you have to find a way to show through the lens? Thank you.
He made him scratch his head on that one.
Yeah, I just prefer to hear you more. In fact, I wasn't even listening to the question, to tell you the truth. So the last, yeah, no, seriously, because You took me, I was flying, let me tell you, I was really flying with the story that I was trying to do, because there are some books I'm reading from traditional sources now on, for example, if you, in my society, for example, if somebody's reading my astrological, and my mother is actually connected to the galactic information of my birth date, when she let me out, all of it's connected. It's in computation, they read my sign, my future. And I was talking to a very, very old priest as I was going back and forth to do Teza, and he was saying to me, the problem in the world is that the woman is destabilized in her destabilization due to man's warped notion of what he'd done to the world. She is, her antenna is lost, it's not connected. And she's not tapping the sources that traditionally women in Ethiopia used to, well, in the world, he was saying. And I was reading another book in South Africa in the same way. And so I was going, when you were talking about the market women, etc., I was really going about listening to you and the guy also. Now your question, let me just see if I got it and then correct me. One, I'll tell you, the most difficult thing about being a filmmaker without resource, without, you know, the banks being on your side, however risky the business is, but the double exclusion, and the fact that I rushed from film to film. I would have preferred, I remember one time I was in a panel with this white filmmaker, and he was complaining because it takes him 3 years to do a movie, and it takes me 19, 20, 15 years to take a movie. I was looking at him like he was from some space. But if I ever had the chance to like only wait 3 years, 4 years, I rushed in between movies. Most black filmmakers who are in my position, we rushed from film to film. What we've started to experiment just gets stale. We don't quickly, like after I heard feedback from Sankofa, all the way to South Africa, the kind of feedback I subjected myself to the community, it was really, I was itching to go right away into film. But it took me another 14 years to go into another film. And that is the most difficult part, that I have many scripts, a different degree in the oven, that I wanted to do a film about. But the fact that you cannot practice your profession every 4 years even, or 5 years, is the most bad part of it. Now, the second one was your question?
The emotional vocabulary of each film.
Well, what happened is it rides from film to film. You cannot imagine how the intensity of the first film I did was, it's called Hourglass. It was about what I noticed white America's ability, consciously or unconsciously, in orphaning black people. So I was working with this, I say, you know what, in every story they continue to orphan black people. And so I wrote a script. I never did a film for exercise. As I told you, when I was supposed to sell deodorant in 3 minutes, I killed Tarzan in 3 minutes. So for me, emotionally, it has to do something to exorcise what I feel. So each film is a transportation of this emotional escalator from film to film. And it gives me the boost that, you know, the rocket people talk about, the O-ring. It boosts me to the next one, each film. Emotionally, you cannot believe how these films have continued to preserve the state I was in. You know, for example, to be a black human being, the night they arrested Angela Davis, and her look from UCLA, Afro sister, we used to just look at her, Angela is there, Angela is there. And all of us, all just folks would say, Angela was our hero. And then when she's handcuffed, her hair changed, the humiliation just ushered itself into a nightmare, a dream I had, where she confronted me physically, you know. And so these films remain to be my vitamin, my energy from film to film, and they remain the core. The core, even my next few films I'm thinking, they do have this this mission that this other movies, when I had less power in my vocabulary, cinematic vocabulary, where I had less, I've improved better, but when I was even very still awkwardly going all over the place to find what I wanted, the emotion remains this transformative from movie to movie. I don't know if that answers you.
I know there's other questions, but we're gonna have the opportunity to speak with Haile close up and personal while we're having some food. 'Cause I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting hungry. But I just wanted to first give our guests the opportunity, if you want to say something in closing, Margot and Jill.
I want to hear, you guys made me talk. I want to hear them. Why was I like?
Please, no, don't try it.
I want to sit back and hear them.
No, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, sister.
It's a great. Just my senses are all kinetic again, so thank you.
Right. I mean, I agree. I think that these Haile's films, they come with a whole different vocabulary without the usual set of assumptions. They're not perfect, but they're challenging. There's something to think about and build on or argue with whoever you see them with or with Haile. And, you know, and that's what we need, because we're going to be assimilated or post-racial or integrated into something really awful. Really awful. And I mean, we are not all precious. We're just not. And I'm not standing for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Haile, Margot Jefferson, Jill Nelson. Please
Michelle,
stay and
thank
have some
you.
food with us. Thank you so much.